Greetings and welcome to another episode of An American Deception. I'm your host, Tavis Sanders, also known as Red Tail Hawk. I'd like to welcome our co-host, Renee Sanders, also known as Red Silver Fox.
Greetings, everyone.
And so, let's just jump right into it and, get the audience caught up with why we want to talk about this subject today. And so, a little while ago, I was reading an article in Ebony magazine back in 2012. And the title of the article was 5 Things to Know About Blacks and Natives. And as I was reading the article, I really started to notice a pattern about the misconceptions that a lot of people have. And really was a little bit upset because so many people possibly had the opportunity to read this article, and it really geared people away from identifying themselves with the Native ancestry that they may have as being Black Americans. And so it's something that I wanted to bring and talk about with the group. And so, we figured let's take a swing at it and see what we can get.
All right, let's go.
Yeah, and so, we got my mother with us, so, it's going to be really interesting. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. Again, the title was 5 Things to Know About Blacks and Natives. It was an article written in 2012 in a November edition of Ebony magazine. And that, so that if you were interested to look it up and read it for yourself, you could take a look at it. But we're going to go over it, and I think we're going to read some of the points, and then we'll go back and talk about the points.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
So did you want to read the first point?
All right, I'll read the first one. Number 1 was how we first hooked up.
Okay.
And it says, the earliest recorded African and Native American contact occurred in April of 1502. When the first enslaved Africans were taken to Hispaniola. Some Africans escaped to Santo Domingo. The first Black Native Americans emerged from these groups.
Okay. Wow. Okay. In that point, it stated that the first Black Native Americans emerged from these groups. But we know that that's not necessarily the case, because the indigenous populations all throughout the southeastern United States and even on the islands and parts of South America were of a Negroid stock. And explorers were already stating these facts before, as they were coming here. And so any African that were brought over here didn't necessarily make the people Black. They were already so-called Black.
Yes, they were of a Negroid stock already. They were already of a dark complexion. As a matter of fact, I have a statement here that says in 1524, the Carolina coast people were said to be of a dark color, not much unlike the Ethiopians. And in that reference, I must say that Ethiopians is not necessarily referring to the people of Ethiopia, but at that time, the continent of Africa was called Ethiopia. Okay. And so that's what they were referring to, that they were of a dark color like the people that were over in Africa.
Yes. Africa, the continent itself,
yes.
Not necessarily one country in Africa.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct, yes.
Now that's interesting. And so basically what these explorers were stating was that these people were of a Negroid color.
That's right, yes.
And so for that statement to say that Black Native Americans came about from the African being introduced into a slave population in 1502 would have been told it's false. It's just false.
It's false.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. I know we had another statement reference
yes.
from 1550, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, this one is from 1550, and this statement is addressing the people that they were being called Negroes. Mm-hmm. So this one, it says that a Spanish official wrote to the king, and again this was in 1550. And it says, in the island of Puerto Rico, there were above 15,000 Negroes and less than 500 Spaniards. And in all of Hispaniola, there may be 2,000 Spaniards, and there are over 30,000 Negroes. The same is the case in the island of Cuba and in Veracruz, Puerto de Caballos, which is in Honduras, and in Nombre de Dios, Cartagena, Santa Maria, and the coast of Venezuela, where there were 20 Negroes to one white man.
Wow. Okay, so basically what they're stating is that the population is a Negroid population, without a doubt.
Yeah, exactly, because at that point there was only a few hundred Africans that had been brought over to the Americas by that time. Maybe a low count. I'm not sure exactly what the count, but there was no way that all of these people could have been in African stock.
Okay, and just to remember, we're talking about the islands also. So, just this is for later, but we're not speaking in reference to the United States as of yet. These numbers are the numbers that are on the islands. We haven't gotten to what they would consider mainland United States yet.
Well, this is the islands, and around the islands in Mexico, Venezuela, Honduras. So this is all in the Gulf area, which is where they were exploring.
Okay, but we haven't touched on Florida, South Carolina, Georgia, or any of these southern states yet.
No, not yet. No.
Okay, so let's go to point two.
But the first point that we did mention, it did mention about the Carolina Coast people
being of a dark complexion as well.
Right.
Okay,
Yes.
and that was 1524.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
So that statement was before this statement was made.
Okay. All right. So let's skip to number 2, and then what does the article, the Ebony article, states as far as number 2 is concerned?
Okay. Well, number 2 was some Native American tribes held slaves.
Okay. And so and I know that unfortunately, or for different reasons, we did, as Native Americans, we would hold slaves, but not necessarily in the way that it would be perceived. I know some of them would be family, where we would allocate some of our brothers and sisters or some of our children as slaves in order to fall underneath different tax brackets in order to keep them safe or from being sold into other forms of slavery.
That's true, yes.
Yeah. So yes, that as far as that's concerned, yes, natives held slaves, but so did everyone else at that time.
Yes, there were many free blacks who were also slave owners. And again, some of that was true. Also with them is that they were holding family members and they wanted to keep families intact. But there were some that also just they could afford. They had slaves.
And I just also make a point that Native Americans were being used as slaves as well.
Oh,
and
yes,
so
most
just
definitely.
because you were a slave, that didn't mean that you came from Africa. And as a matter of fact, later on we'll see more than likely they were of a Native American stock rather than African, as far as being on the mainland United States.
Yes, that's true. Yes.
Okay, so number 2 is basically, that's correct. Natives
Yes.
did hold slaves.
Oh, yes, they did. Yes, they
Okay.
did.
And so let's go to number 3.
Okay, number 3. You do not have Indian up in your family.
Okay.
I find that very interesting. I want to read a little bit more of that statement, though,
Okay.
because it goes on to say, as Harvard University historian Lewis Gates Jr. wrote in 2009, only 5% of all black Americans have at least 12.5% Native American ancestry, the equivalent of at least one great-grandparent. So he's saying that only 5% of black Americans have Native in their family.
Okay. Where would he get that number from? Do you know?
That I have no idea. We need to ask him.
Okay. Okay. So, but let's look at some real numbers.
Well, before we look at numbers, let's look at a statement.
Okay. Okay.
I have a statement that is from the 19th annual report from the Bureau of American Ethnology. This is 1897 to 1898. This is a publication that comes out from the Smithsonian Institute. And the statement reads as, the Indians associated and intermarried with the Negroes until they finally lost their identity and were classed with that race, so that a considerable portion of the blood of the Southern Negroes is unquestionably Indian.
Wow. That's a very profound statement. Now, you said this came from the Smithsonian Institute?
Yes, that's correct, yes.
The 19th annual report. Okay, and this was in
1897.
1897. Okay, so now let's look at this point for a few minutes and go back to the statement. Because, it states that in the statement that Mr. Gates says that, what is it about? 5% of black Americans have Native in their blood. And here we have have the state, the
From the Smithsonian Institute.
right, and they did this for the state so that they could give a appropriate proportion of what was really going on culturally here in the United States.
That's correct, yes.
And in that statement it says, well, first it says that the Indians associated and intermarried with the Negro. Now, again, Negro is a term that they use to classify the indigenous population since the time of their arrival.
That's correct.
And so what Negroes are we talking about here?
Exactly. We don't know which Negroes they're talking about, and especially during slavery, that the Indians and the black, they were all grouped together
and classified as
Negroes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then so that's when the numbers really begin to be of importance. But before we get to the numbers, let's finish this statement. And it says, until they finally lost their identity and was classed with that race. What race was that? The Indians are now being classed with the Negro.
Yes.
However, the Indians were always called Negro. And so now we have an identity reversal, almost, where you're going to classify a Negro as having to be from Africa. And so there we go, stripping away the racial identity of the black population.
And their ethnic identity.
And then it says, so that a considerable portion. And I don't think considerable portion is 12.5%.
Correct.
I don't think so. I think considerable portion would be more than 50%, not necessarily 12.5. And so, it's a lot more that we need to go into. But before we do, let's take a small break, and we're going to make sure that we get right back to this point so that we can give the viewing audience some more factual information.
Okay.
All right, thanks. We'll be right back with more of An American Deception.
Thank you, prayer. We return thanks to our mother, the earth, which sustains us. We return thanks to the rivers and streams, which supply us with water. We return thanks to all herbs, which furnish medicines for the cure of our diseases. We return thanks to the moon and stars, which give us their light when the sun is unseen. We return thanks to the sun that has looked upon the earth with a generous eye. Lastly, we return thanks to the Great Spirit who symbolizes all goodness and who directs all things for the good of his children.
Greetings and welcome back to An American Deception. Before the break, we were going over a quote from the 19th annual report of the Bureau of American Ethnology, and where it stated that a considerable portion of the blood of the Southern Negro was unquestionably Indian, and how that went against the words used by Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates Jr., where he wrote in a 2009 piece that only 5% of all black Americans have at least 12.5% Native American ancestry. And so, let's go back to here, where it's actually a report issued by the government that is saying that most blacks, have a considerable portion of Indian blood in their bloodline.
The Southern blacks.
The Southern blacks, and now Henry Gates, is saying that that is not the case. I don't understand where he's getting these numbers from, but we're going to talk about numbers in a minute. But let's go over this quote for a little bit longer, because not only do you have this quote that states that the Southern Negro is basically Indian, we have other quotes that basically is leaning towards the same thing. And I know that a lot of other issues was going on with regards to slavery and how they were intermingling the two cultures in order to create this new idea or this new hybrid man that they were to control.
And we have to remember also that they were trying to create a white-black society, free slave society. And so a way that they would be able to do that is by mixing these dark-skinned Native Americans in with the Africans and then calling them all Negroes.
Mm-hmm.
Negroes became equivalent to slave.
Mm-hmm.
Or really, actuality, slave became equivalent to Negro.
Correct. Because the Negro, we were being called Negro from the time of their arrival.
Yes.
And so that Negro became synonymous with being a slave. Where if you were a Negro, then by law, then you had to be a slave. Mm-hmm. And by law, if you were a slave, then you had to be from Africa. And thereby stripping our native or our indigenous roots away from us legally.
Yes,
yes. And I have a quote here. We were talking about slaves and the intermingling of the two cultures and percentages and numbers, since people want to talk about blood quantum and you don't really have native in your blood. So let's go over the quote.
Okay, well, one of them is addressing the intermingling of the peoples. And this one is coming from Slavery in the Cherokee Nation by Patrick Mingus, that is stating that during the transitional period from 1650 to 1750, Africans and Native Americans shared the common experience of enslavement. This sharing of lives often led to marriage. The intermarriage of Africans and Native Americans was facilitated by the disproportionate number of African male slaves to females, which was, here it says 2 to 1, but it was actually more than that. Mm-hmm. And the decimation of Native American males by disease, enslavement, and prolonged war against the colonists.
Okay, and so basically what they're saying is that they were removing the Native American men and introducing the African men into the population in order to breed a black and white society, where you would have either you were black or you were white, and they were really trying to get rid of the native population altogether.
Right, and again, when you have this intermingling with the children, because they were in slavery at the time, and this is when slavery was a lifetime sentence, and it also went from the mother. So whatever the mother was, that's what the children were. So if the mother was a slave, then that made the children slave and made the children slave for life also.
I know they had some laws that were being introduced at those times too.
Yes.
Do you want to go over any of them?
Well, we did have Well,
okay. So before we went over the law, did you want to go over the numbers?
Yes. That's
okay.
Right, yes.
All right. So, okay. Well, then you can go ahead and start the numbers, and I can pick up from where you are.
Okay. Well, really, these numbers are talking about the men, the slaves that were brought over from Africa to the Americas, not just the United States, but to the entire Americas. But the percentage of the male, it has here, was 64.5%, and this information is coming from slavevoyages.org. Okay. So 64.5% of the people that were shipped from Africa were males, and 22.3% were children. So that left only 14% of the people that were shipped over here. Only 14% of them were female.
Okay, and so now, so it was a disproportionate amount of men being shipped into being put into slavery. As far as the African is concerned.
Yes.
And again, also with the Native American men, they were disproportionately being shipped out or being put into slavery and being removed off of the mainland in order to bring in the African male to the slave and to the population.
Yes, another story that is really not told and that is the large numbers of the native males that were shipped out of the country. Most of them went down to the islands, and as a matter of fact, some of them, when they were brought or introduced back into the States, they were introduced as Negroes and not really as being native from the country. They were returning them right back to where they came from.
Okay. And also, I just wanted to make a point. 12 million slaves were shipped from Africa into the Americas. However, roughly 300, maybe 400,000 landed in the United States.
Only 5% of the entire African slave trade ended up in the United States.
And so only 5% of the African slave trade ended in the United States.
Yes.
And wow, we'll talk about that at another time.
Yes.
But that number again is only around 250 to 350,000 slaves being shipped directly from Africa into the United States.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, all right. And then again, a disproportionate amount of African males being shipped, and not the female.
Not the females.
Right. And so the African male, in order to procreate, would have to intermarry and integrate into the Native American population.
And they say that is what made the number so large here in the United States, is that the slavery and the population was so stable that it was able to reproduce itself. Well, it was able to reproduce itself because they were using the native females who were already here, so they did not have to acclimate to anything.
Okay.
They were used to this here,
This climate, okay.
Yes, so they were able to reproduce, and some of them were having 10 children. But again, they were able to do that because they didn't travel anywhere. They were already here.
And I guess this is where we can get into the laws that were being created in order to reclassify what a Native American was.
Yes, and there were, by the 1800s, there were many states that were coming out with what they were calling black laws.
Okay.
And one of these black laws, which is really one of the more infamous ones, and really this one is coming from Virginia, but we find that these black laws, they really transferred from state to state to state. What one state did, another state usually picked up and did the same thing. And this one, it says in 1866, after the Civil War, that every person having 1/4 or more Negro blood shall be deemed a colored person, and every person not a colored person having 1/4 or more Indian blood shall be deemed Indian.
Okay, now what does that do? Now, okay, hold on, let's go back. If you have 1/4 or more Negro blood, then you should be called a colored person.
Now again, we don't know what the Negro is.
Right, because a Negro could have been an indigenous individual.
Correct, yes.
And so really here it goes again, where they're really trying to create this white black America, and really trying to remove the Indian away from the now being called colored people. And so if you were dark skinned, and then you weren't able to be classified as an Indian. And so now what about the not colored persons being classified as an Indian? If you had 3 grandparents from Ireland and one of your grandfather was Native American, now you can be called Native American.
That's correct, but if it was the other way around.
If 3 colored individuals were from the indigenous area, and they have 1 African, then now that person is African and they can no longer be Native.
That's correct, yes.
And so, and just that law alone would have stripped away the identity to a large majority of the population.
Many. Many.
And again, and to get back, now again, this law is from 1866. And to get back to the 19th annual report, which was from 1889?
1897.
1897.
Yes.
So they knew even 30 years later that these laws that they were creating was removing the Native identity from these dark-skinned individuals.
And really what happened is, even after that, they started coming up with more laws, that it went from 1/4 to 1/8, and then it eventually went to 1/16, and then it went to 1 drop.
Okay, hold on, 1/16. So a person could have 15 grandparents, great grandparents from America. One parent from Africa, and they would be considered African. They could not be classified as a Native American.
That's correct, yes.
But then on the same term, it could be 15 British and 1 Native American, and now that person can be classified as Native American.
That's yes.
All right.
Yes.
Well, we have to wrap it up there.
Okay, but we do need to just touch on this one last topic,
And what's that?
and that was the book that they suggested. Okay, and their number 5 was the definitive book, Black Indians by William Loring Katz.
Okay.
And that was what they felt was a definitive book. However, we feel that there are more books out there that have much more information where you could get more factual information.
All right, and there I could lead them. If you're interested in more information on this or other programs, or if you'd like to know more information about this particular topic today, please visit our website. Or you can email us at anamericandeception@gmail.com. We'd like to thank you again for tuning in. Again, my name is Tavis Sanders, also known as Red Tail Hawk. I'd like to thank our co-host, Renee Sanders, also known as Red Silver Fox.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of An American Deception, and we hope to see you again soon. Peace.
Peace.